Welcome everyone, this is Sovereign Key with Sovereign Key Productions, Lau de Leon. We are here doing part 2 of the Mastermind series with Marilee Niatin. We're going to be going deeper into the black abyss of information with regards to the hardwiring and other topics with connection to the nature of this, quote, unreal reality, shall we say. Marilee?
We just want to expand from where we were before with part 1. We touched archetypes, hardwiring, a bunch of other little topics that we wanted to kind of expand on there, and the virus that is now kind of unraveling. I don't know if anybody else has noticed that. Started the last one, and there are a lot of things have happened since then, so I guess we'll just kind of take it from there.
So the psychic virus that we're discussing being in the process of unraveling is what I commonly refer to as the convergence of the event horizon and the dismantling. What we're going to do is we're just going to explain a little bit deeper on what the psychic virus is, the origin of its inception, the minds of beings here. I'd like to say human beings, but I think the state of affairs is that everyone is a unique type of hybrid, but that's another story.
I try to talk with people a lot about stepping out of the identity as human. We're here to experience this through the human experience. And sometimes when we over-identify and focus in on that, we lose a lot of the bigger picture. So some of us have incarnated here as other beings than just human beings too, and we carry some of that in our remembrance.
Exactly.
So not only in our genetics, but in stories that we talk about, all of that.
Part of this is trying to break down the associations that we have been mind washed to believe, and that's to be the lie of. The idea and the conception of a human being in terms of what the reference was to a human being is also very interesting, and this is something that isn't really brought up because the brainwashing and the programming has removed the data and the original data banks with a connection to why all of this happened the way it happened, including the psychic virus and what and how it works through the container of, quote, a human or a hybrid. But originally the name human, a human being, in one of the original legal dictionaries is, the definition is a hybrid monster.
Hybrid, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Human being based etymologically as connected to humus, H-U-M-U-S.
Yes.
The dirt and the earth,
yes.
The humus soil of earth.
Interesting though, how the original reference though is a hybrid monster. I think that this comes back to the original takeover that occurred with the original creatoress, with the patriarchal agenda, which is where the Wetiko virus is also associated with these beings, or I guess these energies that you can call, that try to destroy the divinity, the female creator. And that means the destruction of that power would be the destruction of that power from being alive within us, within the living beings. So it makes sense to me that they would come up, that somewhere in the law of the, what we were discussing in the spelling of the birthing, the system of the court, or the demonic circle of the courthouse, which these terms, these legal terms, are what they reference and how they reference human beings as. So I think this goes to the original infectors, the original forces.
Yeah, that goes back to a lot of the language that we use now. That's exactly what it is it's the corporate contract language. And a lot of times when we say a certain word, we don't really know what the connotation behind that word is. We either just have learned to not pay attention any longer. And one thing I guess we didn't bring up the last time was how intention.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things that we kind of touched on last time. But that is part of taking the power back, is
Mm-hmm.
knowing what your intention is when you're using these words.
Yeah.
Because even though, like, the swastika as a symbol happened, you can actually reclaim that back as long as you are clear enough in your projection and the energy you're putting into that. You can start reclaiming that back.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that kind of gets tricky if you want to get into the posturing and arguing kind of thing. That isn't kind of where I'm going. I'm just being aware of what you are empowered with, and being able to project that into what you write, what you say, how you think. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of people who attempt to do something, but they don't have the right, or they don't have the power behind the intention. That is where the manifestation can come through. So that has a lot to do with actually stepping into and I don't want to say belief. I really don't want to say that word, because to believe is just to be of the lie of. So we need another word to feel the truth of something. And to back that up with that intention is to really step in that knowingness and the autonomy connected with that knowingness, that you don't need something else to support your knowing of it. So absolutely 100%.
Yeah, I think that's very important, is to be able to, that's to bring it up from within yourself and from that center out, instead of looking for the answers externally in.
Exactly.
We need to verify what is going on in our internal world by comparing it to the outside, but we can't let the outside lead us, if that makes any sense.
No, because then the intention would be null and void, and your manifestive ability wouldn't be yours. It would be something else that it's being attached to, and that is attaching to you. So the core, everything is within you. Everything, the kingdom is within you. You are the kingdom. So that is that has all the answers.
Going back and thinking in the terms of a virus, one thing that I have noticed is as soon as we reach out frequency-wise to another being or any other frequency, we are opening up that channel where it is two-way. So we need to learn how to filter what is coming back to us as to what is authentic and what really speaks to us, or what is an overwrite, like the overwritten virus. So that's kind of what we need to do, is look at that and learn how to monitor it on a natural, spontaneous basis, where you don't have to think it through all the time. But until you get used to doing that, you do have to say, stop that thought. Let me, analyze this just a little bit here before I accept it.
Well, the virus acts as just like a machine, okay? And I have to say that both are indiscernible. You can't discern the difference between the virus and the machine, and how that overwrite happens because of the technology that they've created, aka the body. Also the mind, because the CPU of the brain system is the hard drive, and hence that's the operating system. So you're essentially removing, or you have to remove the corruption from the operating system, and that is a part of what the filtering is. But it's very interesting to me when you think of the machine and the virus versus nature, versus your nature spirit, because the two are very different. And this is where we can go into the senses and the emotional body. This is where we go into the terrain of how we have been comprised to interface with everything with these bodies.
From my background in the mental health system, that's one thing that I've really tossed around a lot. I come from a kind of a foreign within the system idea, is that I think a lot of what we're looking at here, they call illness or disease or maladaptation that's going on in the mental and the psyche, is I think it's a natural response to an unnatural stimulus. I think a lot of what we're seeing is our natural selves are screaming out about this artificial stimulation that we're getting and just trying to survive. So when I talk about things like that, you know, when we talk about symptoms and behaviors and that kind of stuff, we want to get a little bit objective on that and kind of remove ourselves from that. But all emotion is the chemical responses and how your brain reacts to the sensations of those chemicals that are in there. So we have the body that's working in there too, and the chemical processes that happen. So,
well,
and those can all be altered. We all know that that's happening with what they're putting in the food, the water, the air.
Well,
that is altering the chemical reactions that are going on.
Well, and that's also the technologies that are, you know, heart technologies, heart type technologies. They are literally transforming alpha states to beta, which this is what we're discussing here, because the field is plasma. And there's electromagnetism that travels through the plasma, and you can manipulate that any way you want. Now, and so, of course, frequency and electricity is the best way to do that, and they've mastered that. What you said with regards to mental illness and just disease, whether it's of the mind or the body, part of the maladaptation of something that is natural, a natural response to an unnatural invasion, so to speak. I find that,
yes.
yeah, and I find that really interesting because for years, have been fascinated with the mind and with mental illness and with disease and with how manifestation responds to overstimuli or the stimuli that is present. And I've often thought that mental illness is the vivisection of a person, of oneself, where you are holographically cutting pieces of yourself out, and you haven't integrated those pieces because of the trauma. So the trauma is all artificially stimulated. It's artificially induced, which takes us back to, again, the psychic virus.
And the hyperstimulation that we're seeing around us, everything's got to be faster, harder, more intense. And when we are operating at high intensity like that, that's not a natural state for us. So that keeps people hyper aroused. making decisions blindly,
Yeah.
because you don't have time to think it through, you know, and constantly being hammered by like the adrenal glands and, you know, so we're seeing a lot of stuff physically with disease sitting in that way. The whole thing with trauma actually being locked into the muscles where, you know, that, so you can't really separate all of that stuff, and it's very difficult to try to talk about it through all of that. But, you know, we did talk some about the alchemy in the last one, and I think right now is a good time to bring that up, is how our container, our bioform, is the alchemical container.
Yes. Yeah.
And this is my personal belief, going along with the whole storyline of the mythos of the Holy Grail. The Graal or Ael is the blood. Now that story has, you know, kind of gone on a lot of different tangents and everything, but the way I kind of understand it is that this body is the vessel, it's the container, it's the cauldron, and the petri dish, the test tube, whatever you want, kind of analogy you want to use with it. But with the emotions and all of that, we get the chemicals going in there, the pressure, the stress, and that causes the catalyst effect. So I think that's exactly what the human container is all about, is that's how I've used it, that, you know, a couple of lifetimes through this, is to be able to bring this in and transmute the wounding and the pain, and you know, not only my own, but ancestrally, species wise. You can take that as far as you want, because as you're working yours, that ripples out to everything else too. So that's kind of how I look at it, is the body is the holy grail of transformation.
And there is no doubt about that. And they've known that every force that has incepted humanity on various, or I like to call it womanity. The point of inception for womanity is always targeting the blood. And from the blood, they know that that's also where the spirit connection to the body is. So the sum total of memory, remembrance, now this is, you know, also that something that is very profoundly interesting, because the artificial technology has created its own cell of remembrance and cell soul versus the spirit. But the Graal, as you know, the Graal, which is the blood, is the original of it all. It is the membrane of remembrance in everything. And this is where we have to bring it out through manifestation in these vehicles on this level. It can't happen anywhere else. It just can't happen. We would not be a complete creation without being able to transfer it through this medium and transmute everything from this point. And that's hugely important. So everything, you know, is related to the Graal. I mean, even the Tower of Babel, which is English, the term for English is Babel. It's actually Babel. That's the actual term for English, for language. That was also not about literally altering the languages everybody spoke. The language of Babel is DNA. And then from that point, everything gets changed, because that's the point of manifesting reality, manifesting creation more than reality. I mean, the machine can create realities, but creation creates creation. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that has really been hammered out of our essence too is the spark of creation, because people, a lot of people have lost that connection to actually being the creator, the creatrix. I don't know, you know, that just gets mind-boggling, talking about babbling, you know, it's mind-boggling even, that, you know, how they have set that up, you know, because people are just too busy to pay attention to that creative spark. And plus, we've been told over and over again that we're not worthy of doing that. We don't, there's no value into it. The way that the two words free and value have been totally muddled is just kind of, I don't know. Sometimes I just have to shake my head. I don't know what to do else other than that.
Well, the basis of our magic comes through our visual capacity to think the spark thought. So the spark, we are the, you know, I always say we are the sparks of the all spark. And the spark is that thought, that creative, it's where creation is. So the reason why they don't want people tapping into their creation and their creator ability is because that's where the power is. That's where a lot of your manifesting capacities are. Now, you know, and this is, it's all frequency. We're talking frequencies here because everything, this is a sea of frequency. It's an ocean of frequency. But there is a huge difference between high intensity, as we were discussing, and also high frequency. Those are two opposites, complete opposites. So the natural frequency that has been tampered with in womanity would be a lower frequency, which is not even natural for us. It is something that had to be through intervention tweaked and turned down. So this low frequency is attached to, quote, the reptilian brain more so, and the response, the somatic response of the physicality of the body. That's why the body is its own memory for trauma. Whether you recall it or not is irrelevant, because your body has retained full memory of it and will live out that memory. So this state of low frequency, which is what hammers people's creation ability and their visual capacity, is, you know, it's something that has to be transmuted itself. That has to be transmuted so that, you know, it's almost like in the wild where the animals, when they're traumatized, they automatically start shaking. It's the same kind of idea, where to raise above these lower frequencies that are attached to the reptilian brain, and how this psychic virus works to keep everybody in, quote, and it's like, you know, everybody's suffering from illusions. Everybody's suffering from hallucinations. It's the one big, huge mass hallucination that people are experiencing, but it's not even a correct one. It's not. It's false. I mean, you could even say that the hallucination is something that is felt within how they manipulate emotions and all of the senses, just so that you live out in reaction and manifest whatever that psychic virus wants you to live out, whatever it wants you to be and to feel and to thus live and create. But those low frequencies, I mean, they are, quote, creating worlds of their own based on those lower realms that can attach themselves to it. The higher frequencies would be, you know, where you are transmuting it and you are able to discern the difference between them. You're able to discern what is your nature, your spirit, versus the manipulation of all of these sophisticated magic technologies, mind interface technologies, you know, binary, tertiary, quad, third, fourth, fifth dimension.
And you take this into the parasite, and what the parasite does sometimes is drip feed that feel-good chemical back to its host to help it to continue getting the nourishment, the food, the frequency that it needs through that host. And the one thing I've learned to do is I automatically, in my mind, I when something presents and I get that red flag or that blip that happens, I quick and invert it to see, okay, what is really being presented here? Because it's usually just the opposite. We were talking about mirrors within mirrors earlier. And that's kind of, and it can just boggle the mind when you start going in all of these fractals around there. That whole mishmash of emotional soup that goes on, it's usually just the opposite of what would actually be the response in a natural state.
Yes, and I also think that part of how this psychic parasite has worked in the, quote, minds, membrane minds of everyone, is that it has created a parasite in us so that we are our own parasite. And that's part of the mirror system as well, because we've become, you know, in order for this to work, we have to become that as well. And we have to mimic that within ourselves in the way that we translate to everything around us. So I think that the majority of how everything operates in the world, because of this programming, it is based on us assuming the parasite mind and becoming parasites ourselves, if that makes any sense. And I don't mean that in, you know, I'm not saying this is part of what we have to transmute. This is part of what we have to discover and figure out when we project things onto others, if it's originally ours or if it's something projected onto us. Like, the whole nature of projection is a mastermind piece of engineering from the parasite, from the psychic parasite. The projection and the mirroring, to me, is like it's a wham. It's like, wow, you just whammed humanity completely, because most everyone responds and reacts to projections and mirroring, not knowing that they are something different, not knowing that their nature has nothing to do with either of those things, and therefore they don't really see how to put a boundary so that they protect themselves from this kind of an attack, which is, you know, it's being passed off as normal. This is being passed off as natural behavior amongst people. It's not. It's not at all. And this is the thing that is a virus within itself that has taken over the planet.
And see, that's the mutation effect of it that I had written about a few months ago. And the way that you put it there, that's exactly what I had said to one other person, is what I'm seeing in society and social media especially now, is how the person is actually being, and I can't find the right term, I wanted to say a sub-host, but they are actually hosting the virus to feed the host behind them. It's kind of a chain reaction that's going on. I've been watching that frequency and where it's going, and you know, I just, it just spins my mind sometimes, and I could usually keep a pretty good grasp on that.
Well, and if we were to
it's just
say,
going so fast anymore, it's hard to keep up with.
Exactly. And this is why a part of what we're focusing on is also to help people break away from this, especially because this is really unpleasant. It's unpleasant to live a life like this that's based on constant projection and mirroring, and not even knowing or ascertaining what your spirit is and your nature and your own thoughts that have nothing to do with this and what's imposed on you. It's and then because of the imposition, you take it on as though it's real and true, and then it becomes true. So, and it's a very inverted reality, and it's an inverted emotional dysregulation pandemic, if you will. That's it.
Wow, that was a mouthful, Laura.
That's the best way I can put it. So the more that we can start discerning the difference between what are our true nature thoughts, our true thoughts connected to our own spirits that have nothing to do with the programming, that have nothing to do with the hardwiring, that have nothing to do with the archetypes or any of this, washing of the mind, the more that we will be able to create boundaries that are healthy for ourselves and literally not allow those around us to do this to us, and vice versa, and us not do anything like this to anybody else, because this is what causes sickness in people when they accept this. This is actually what causes a lot of disease. It causes a lot of anxiety. It causes a lot of like I say, the distorted thinking, the sort of Alice in Wonderland, I don't know where I am reality of not knowing the craziness versus what's real. So you just take on what this projection is or this mirror, and suddenly you don't know the difference between that and what is real or what is true, not real, because real is REEL. So I think I think boundaries are vital and crucial, because energy is a very living force that is literally capable of creating or uncreating things. So energy can do all manner of things. There are no limit. There are not limits to energy. And the more that we can start really seeing things for what they are, the more that we can see that, there's sometimes, I'm just going to give you an example, because I believe that this all has to do with the psychic virus. This all has to do with the programming that we're going to get a little deeper in. But I'm going to give an example where if you're not ready or prepared, and you're not protected, and you're not you haven't sealed in your verse. And when I say verse, I mean verse, because the nature of this this realm is a verse. Everything is created upon the verse, the sound, the frequency. That's what creates the manifested states that we experience. And when we say universe, UN means to uncreate the verse. It actually is a no to the positive. The un is a negative and the verse is a positive. When you get a negative and a positive, you get a negative. So it's uncreating your reality. That's why the actual correction would be to say just verse. So when you haven't sealed in your verse in protection, and let's say you just walk into a place, sometimes you can get hit by these projected arrows from people who are energetically feeling you and maybe feel threatened or whatever, or they're being used or utilized by forces who in turn have sent literally an arrow of poison to you. And suddenly within seconds of impact, you have experienced pain, you've experienced crippling pain, or you're suddenly just electrified and you can't move. The symptoms can be, they can be anything and everything. But the origin of this is this arrow that has been shot at you by projection magic. And suddenly you're experiencing literally a physiological response, as though you have been shot by an arrow, as though you have been shot by a weapon. And this is true, and this is how energy works. Energy is a manifested state of being. So, you know, where a person may see an actual gun, there could be an actual gun in the energetic form, and it can do, you know, severe damage to you. And this is, of course, what people do without even knowing it. They just throw this energy around, not realizing. And so, you know, a lot of damage can happen, a lot of psychic warfare, psychic attacks. So it's important for people to start really trying to start directing the way that they sense things, so that they know what's themselves, what's spirit, what's their own nature, versus what's perhaps being thrown at them by something or someone else, or being mirrored back.
And being able, I think it's very important to be able to know when to go on the defense, when you need to really close that off. And because I have noticed that so many people are walking in hyper defense mode, and it only takes one little thing and they're projecting out, you know, and just shooting things at other people wildly.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and there's just no rhyme or reason behind it. It's like an automatic reaction that has been set up within people to just project out to damage whatever is around them. That's kind of, it reminds me of some of the experiments I heard about, you know, when they overpopulate areas using rats and how they turn on one another.
Yeah.
And that is the frequency I feel right now, is that we're in this overpopulated area. And I'm not saying number wise, I'm saying frequency wise.
Mm-hmm.
It is like it is so contained and being so pressurized that people are and just shooting blindly.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the empaths, the ones that are like sponges to this stuff, and it just hammers everybody from all directions. And then pretty soon you're so wore out, you're so exhausted that I don't know, you just want to hide,
Mm-hmm.
run away.
Well, this is where,
or you know, that flight or freeze thing, you know.
Yeah. Well, this is it causes fight or flight responses on purpose, and this is part of the psychic virus parasitic response, reptilian response. That's what they want. But people have to begin to know what isn't theirs. If it's not yours, don't accept it. Don't take it, and certainly don't take it on, because that never was yours to begin with.
Yeah.
Projections and mirroring are not typically, they don't, when they're done to you, it's not you. So I always say to people, you know, what's yours is yours, what's theirs is theirs. That's it. And just establish the boundary, and don't be sorry for the boundaries. My God, there's no justification for creating boundaries for yourself. It's absolutely, you undo the boundary by justifying it. It's our sovereign right to do so. But this brings us to perhaps talking about the programming itself, and maybe we could discuss Terra and Tiamat, and
Okay.
go a little bit into the dragon versus the serpent, the black versus white, the origin of things, and demystifying the archetypes and what the archetypes are.
Yeah, a lot of people have grabbed a hold of that term archetype. There are some basic archetypes out there, like the father, the mother, the scapegoat, you know, there's some basic ones there, and we all play with those within ourselves, and we see those symbolically as we are looking out And then if it matches as it comes in, then we can take on that archetype and act it back out. It's kind of a feedback loop is the way that I see the archetypes when they're flowing. Now, if they get stuck and you over-identify with an archetype, like the hero's journey, that we're all, you know, that hero archetype that Hollywood likes to hammer us with all the time. It's the same story over and over again. You know, you have the hero that just gets beat right down to a pulp and everything, and then he all of a sudden comes back, you know, miraculously. You know, that's over and over and over again, which, you know, as a narrative, it's a beautiful narrative. It's empowering. It gives you hope. But, you know, when you can't break out of that into other perceptions, other facets of that storyline, then you're just stuck in there. You were talking about the reptilian, we were talking about the fight and flight. It's the same thing. They keep you locked into that, because then you can go into the higher cortexes of your brain that gives you the reasoning power, that gives you the creative power, and then the corpus callosum that gets the two hemispheres talking. All of that stuff shuts down because you've got everything down there in that reptilian, and it's locked in. And mind you, we all have the reptilian brain. All humans have got reptile brain.
Yes, indeed.
That kind of freaks some people out. So, yeah. And that can lead us back into that serpent dragon thing, and the misconceptions of, sure, that there are some ugly, warped periods in there, but the serpent in a lot of old myths and everything is the keeper of wisdom. The energy that can go within the womb of earth, you know, and if you get to look at it, some of the beauty that is behind that, it makes it a lot easier than to be afraid of the serpent or afraid of the dragon.
Well, I think part of what has happened in the pathology of the mind of humanity is that they have taken these original foundations and inverted them. And part of the inversion is to hide the knowledge. It's to hide the knowledge of what it is, but along the way, that knowledge has been corrupted and perverted and inverted. So,
yeah, I would like to share a story that my great-grandmother told me when I was a very, very young girl, that started me into this, looking at everything from a different angle. It has to do with that the age-old story of the damsel in distress hidden in the cave with the dragon guarding her, and the knight, saint, whoever. It's been attributed to a number of different saints that slay the dragon. That whole story, she told me originally started that the damsel, the woman, the feminine that was in there was not a damsel in distress. That was the authentic divine feminine within the womb of earth, the cave. The dragon was guarding her from the patriarchy. The patriarchy is the knight with the sword, and when the knight with the sword slayed that guardian dragon, that is the tipping point of when the false patriarch took over the authentic feminine. So I've always looked at that little story, you know, and you know, and I've watched how a lot of people are fearful of the dragon, and they try to make the dragon to be the bad guy all the time because of this storyline that has perpetuated through there. But that's not necessarily so. The dragons are also the guardians of these realms too. So I just wanted to kind of add that out there, to look at things from a different angle sometimes.
yeah, and I think that we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater in anything that we think we know. And that's
Mhm.
I mean, we're looking at brainwashing and brain mapping so that every person is brainwashed. So they brain map so that they can brainwash. That's really to
Yeah.
think that we know really anything that is a perception that's been induced in us from birth in the programming within the hard drive. I think this is where we have to disengage. This is where we have to disengage from the story and from the narrative, and we have to be willing to be objective and come at it from a actual still point, a still point, a 0 point, a point where there's no reference to you in it, that you're not invested in
Yeah.
it in one way or another, because the second that you are, there's going to be a distortion. So, you
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
but I like that. I mean, I would really like to get into, what, and maybe let's bring out a little more knowledge about the dragon and about the serpent from the
Okay.
origin and from lineages, because I would really like to discuss lineages and blood and you know, and the grawl thereof in origin of creation.
Okay. Okay.
What thoughts do you have?
I'm trying to figure out where to even start with that, because that has been a very twisted approach to that, because everybody seems to want to find the bloodline, good or bad, right? You've got the royal bloodline that everybody focuses on, that is going on, and then you have the bloodline through the Merovingians, and then you have the bloodlines um, trying to trace lineage from the character that they speak of as being Jesus with Mary Magdalene, and man, has it really gotten, it's just totally blown up.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to think that majestic family tree of humanity is much more common than branched. If you know, does that make any sense?
Yeah,
There's more commonalities than
yes.
differences.
So what you're saying is that you think that we are related on those levels more than we think that we're not.
When you're looking at lineages, just keep in mind, I guess, that what you're looking at is the surnames. Those are the name of the men, not the maternal lines that you're looking at. So if you want to get into some of the original bloodlines, you're going to have to go through the maternal lines, the mitochondrial bloodlines, the DNA mitochondria that will lead you through that. It'll give you a whole different picture. Not that one's any better than the other. I'm not trying to say that. One's just as valid as the other. It's just the emphasis has been placed on the paternal, the patriarchy. The women have taken on the men's names when they're married. That's actually an ownership kind of thing.
Absolutely.
The women became chattel, the women became property, and that's how they transferred property.
Absolutely.
So,
And that's the word husband actually is in reference specifically to that ownership of, cattle. So yeah, it's all contrived. Absolutely. But in order to find the true lineage, you would have to go through the mitochondrial of both parents. You would have to actually access the mitochondria original, the original one through both of them, not just one. So if you look at your mother, that's like having 50% of your data. And that I don't think is right, because but we're talking on a flesh level, but then there's the lineage in terms of your passageway through the physical manifested experiment. And that's a different kind of lineage, which is actually much more truth-based than, because I mean, surnames have been changed. It would be almost impossible to track that anyway. So
Yeah.
the etheric energy connected to your DNA in terms of the you know, the point of your own entrance into manifested being would be closer to what, and this is where I wanted to discuss, this is why I brought up dragons, this is why I brought up the serpent, this is why I brought up these and I know that essentially they're all archetypes, but at the very beginning of creation, in what we are experiencing, something had to be. So there was a form, one form first that had to take place.
One state of being that isn't of this tangible reality system that we're in right now, and how that gets from a non-tangible to a tangible to be manifest, but then to counter that and make it go full spiral back to the non-manifest.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's where I'm kind of conceptualizing that. I was trying to figure out where you're connecting that with the dragon and the serpent, though.
Well, I mean, the dragon, as we know, is one of the original guardians, you could say.
Yes.
And their placement in the storyline of creation is a creatress, I guess, yeah, a dragon, a female dragon that gave life in origin.
Yeah, well, that's where they had connected the storyline with Tiamat. So is that where you're going with that?
Yeah.
Is the great
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So that's to me in the way that I have visualized it goes back to the dragon lineages.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's well, it really got presented in the Sumerian and the Mesopotamian. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what a lot of people still hold on to right now, because we've lost most of that's before that. But I think that story, that narrative goes back way even before that. It was just at that point is when the names that we're familiar with Tiamat and Anu and Enki and Enlil, you know, that whole storyline that spins out of there. Mm-hmm. It is my understanding with the Tiamat, what had happened with that storyline of Marduk, mm-hmm. Taking on the grandmother dragon, mm-hmm. Dismembering her, and there we go back to where our whole storyline of dismemberment and remembrance
exactly
comes in. Now this plays out within us just as much as it played out on the bigger stage that I'm talking about through this one mythos. Mm-hmm. But she was scattered, and I don't think I have ever seen anybody specifically say this about the corruption of the dragon DNA. There might be some out there, but I came in with this little piece here, but I haven't been able to find it specifically in someone else's work right yet. Mm-hmm. But there was a corruption when she was dismembered and put into stasis and asleep, mm-hmm. that her DNA was corrupted at that time, and that's where the viruses and the things that we're seeing now that have gone on for millions of years now have really exploded. The end product of what we're looking at right now was the splicing of that DNA. To use, that's not a good term, mm-hmm. you know, that it's hard to get the words wrap around it when you're looking at it from this allegorical kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But somewhere in there, yes. And I am convinced that with what has happened with that whole huge storyline is that she is being remembered.
Mm-hmm.
Her members are coming back together in that larger storyline, and as that's happening, we are doing that on our own microcosm as well.
Exactly, micro to the macro, and that's what she's going through, we're going through, because we share the same DNA for the most part. What are these belief systems? What are these belief systems where people create an entire world based on them? And how could we objectively try and aid someone breaking that programming enough so that they're able to just have their own criticism, their own critical thinking, and where there is a demystification of all of these figures that are locking them into their own belief systems that they're imprisoned within, in the cell of their own mind, literally the cell, like cell, C-E-L-L. How would you help someone like that? How would you help them to establish a different kind of perception that would allow them to begin to critically think for themselves and demystify these brainwashing programs, these deep-rooted belief systems?
Well, I know this sounds harsh, Laura, but I've come to the point now that I'm no longer interested in trying to awaken the ones that don't want to wake up,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes any sense at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to watch for someone that is willing to look outside the box. And then I try to help them find their own voice within there, that whatever that was that encouraged them to peek outside that box and try to nurture that. As for the ones that are totally plucked with that, that's just a waste of energy, I think. You know, we can have the information out there, but until they're willing to look at it, there's that's not my responsibility, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, what if somebody said, because I often get this as well, I mean, the idea and the concept of a savior.
To me, that is very disempowering. It's okay to look at heroes. It's okay to look at people or figures that inspire you. But if you're laying down and waiting to be passively saved, that is very disempowering. That is a huge victim stance that we're seeing with a lot of people, is they expect something or someone else to come and miraculously fix the mess.
And you're giving away your power. Literally, you're giving away your power. You're giving away your authority, and you're giving away your sovereignty, and you're giving it away to something that you're not even sure what it is. It is something that has been put in you. If something is taking your power from you, it's taking your verse from you. So how is that going to save you? It has to be from within. Yeah. I mean, I could even say that the Book of Thomas says that the kingdom of heaven is within you. These are really critical insights into the nature of how all of this works, because reality here, or this realm and the manifested states of quote reality, real REEL, are often based on something parasiting you, something taking your power from you.
Well, one thing that I try to keep in mind when I get into the dialogue within my own being about external archetypes, beings, that kind of thing, and when I'm reading other people's material and like the Bible and all of the other interpretations. I just chose that one out of random, but there's many of them out there that claim to have the answer. And there's beautiful stuff in there. But as soon as I start seeing the telltale, to get there, you must worship me. To get there, you must
sacrifice
bow
things
to
for me, and you must bow. Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Be subservient to me. And it's written in some very colorful terminology and then it's woven in there where you don't even see it as you're reading it or
Right.
hearing it. It's like 3 or 4 words that are in a whole paragraph that will lock you in, and that is where the contract is written. That's where the agreement is written. It's okay to stand with someone else, support someone, to lean on someone or something, but it's not right to ask to extract the energy from another person to do that. If it's a fine line in there. And when you do open that up, then we talked about that last time too, is those boundaries of loosening those up. If you continually ask other entities, other beings, other frequencies to enter into your space, your boundary gets weakened. That's what we're seeing a lot of with a lot of people now. It's very weak boundaries. They don't know what they are, and these entities are coming in and out willy-nilly. That's why it is hard for that person to know what's theirs and what something else's is, because it's been bombarded for so long.
Yeah, and eventually the weakening of their boundaries, the weakening of their field, eventually is going to lead into much more serious states of invasion. So,
yes. And we're already seeing some of those extreme states. That's for sure.
Well, and it's like we said, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't like saying that saying, though. That's not a very nice saying, actually. But there are truths in there are truths in everything, and I think that the design of this realm is that essentially everything is black and white squared. So, and that's where your discernment is meant to come in. But as long as your power isn't given away, that's really that's the most important thing, because we have to do our own work. We have to be responsible. We have to be accountable. We have to literally be willing to own everything that we have created, including everything we justify, the excuses, because the work is in here, in this level. This is where it's at, and this is where the transmutation has to take place.